Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another action-packed, fun-filled, exciting What Matters to Me and Why. And Happy New Year. We're kicking off the new year with a physicist. My name's John Stupar. I teach in the School of Engineering, and I'm also president of the Campus Interfaith Center and a member of the organizing committee, the founding organizing committee of What Matters to Me and Why. And I'm just here to kick off our event with some introductory comments. For those of you who might not know a little history about What Matters to Me and Why here, since the fall of 2012, we've hosted this luncheon monthly throughout the academic year, except for June and December. And we've given 10 members of our faculty or staff an opportunity to open their hearts and souls to the UCI community and to share what matters to them and why. And so today is actually our 10th speaker. Can't believe we've gone that long already. Jonathan, where are you? Yeah, it's amazing. And this program was developed with the intention to encourage reflection on values and beliefs and motivations in the lives of those who shape our university. And the series explores personal journeys, experiences, choices that people made, the difficulties they had, and maybe faith that they encountered, commitments that they formed, and challenges, and joys that they even revealed, all with the hope that these stories that they share with us will help us to understand in a little more way the diverse paths in life, in work, in leadership. And such understandings, I personally believe, are crucial for fortifying tolerance, for strengthening bonds, and supporting virtues that make us who we are here at UCI, as we really and truly celebrate diversity here. I just love UCI for that perspective. We really celebrate diversity here. And we're going to do it some more this year in celebrating diversity with a fair. And so today's featured speaker is our very own plasma physicist, Dr. Bill Heidbrink, who will be introduced by Daniel Quain. Is Daniel? Daniel's here. But before I do that, I want to invite you to join us next month, Wednesday, February 12th, to hear our Chancellor, Michael Drake, talk about his life journey and his perspectives. And I just want you to know that you should probably plan to sign up early for that event because we expect a capacity crowd.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so my name's Dan. I've been asked to introduce the speaker. So I guess I'm going to be a little selfish here and kind of just introduce myself first. Just to get some backstory, I'm a second-year graduate student, PhD. Came here due to Systems Biology Gateway program, and now I'm in the Computer Science department. So if anyone's trying to figure out am I a biologist or comp sci, I'm sort of both. And And when I was asked to nominate a speaker, and coming from both a biology and comp sci background, a basic science background, I knew I wanted to nominate someone who exemplified scientific pedagogy and research. And Dr. Heidbrink sort of was a natural choice for me. Although he's a plasma physicist, I do consider myself a bit of a physicist. I have a physics background as well from undergrad. And as I was looking him up, I found out some interesting things about him. So, of course, I needed to find a researcher who basically had a lot of the things I wanted to have in the future, because I want to be a professor. And so, when I was looking through Dr. Heidbrink's accomplishments and what he had, I noticed he had an extensive list of publications. Of course, that's what I want to have when I'm a professor. He's also quite smart. He's received, it goes without saying, he received an award for distinguished teaching in 1995. He's a fellow of the American Physical Society in 1996. 2004, he received an Excellence in Plasma Physics Research Award from the American Physical Society. And I think most importantly of all, he has a chili pepper on ratemyprofessors.com. So you can put that on your CV. And last month, I had the pleasure to meet with Dr. Heidbrink in person to get to know more about him. And I was especially surprised and glad to know he has a heart for social justice. He elaborated to me and my student peers that he believes a lot of the problems in social justice are tied directly to problems in education. And so he would tell me he would do things like teach inner city kids, and not only that, he also prepares his own students to do some of their own teaching. So I thought that was great. Not only did this guy identify a problem, he actually went out and did something about it. That's actually pretty rare. A lot of us can point out problems. Very few of us can actually go and do something about it. And I hope that as you hear him talk today, you can just notice how much of a passion he has for people and for teaching. And so without further ado, I pass the mic off to Dr. Heidbrink.
Thank you, Dan. Well, it's impossible in 25 minutes to cover everything that matters to me and why. So there's some things that really matter to me that I'm not going to talk about very much. My wife's sitting over here. She really matters to me. My children, I have 3 adult children. They matter to me tremendously. But I'm not going to talk about them. For my presentation here, I've decided to kind of follow my journey and how I've had the opportunity to gradually integrate my most cherished values into my work here at UCI. Seems like an appropriate thing to cover at a forum like this, and it makes for a nice story. To carry it around, partly to help me remember what I want to say, and also just because I like visual aids, I have 4 visual aids. There's 4 parts to my talk, and so we'll have these visual aids that will let you know which part we're in. So, this is visual aid number 1. I grew up in Newport. And as a kid, with my buddies, I rode my bike to the beach. We went body surfing. I had an older brother who didn't want to grow up. And he would take me on surfing trips all up and down California and Baja. I lived across the street from Mariners Park. We played the park after school every day. I just loved the outdoors. My grandparents had a cabin on Mount Baldy that we would go to. My family went family vacations in the Sierras. I went backpacking in the Sierras. And I also grew up in the 60s where it was very fashionable to be concerned about the environment. So by the time I was a young adult, I was an ardent environmentalist. Now at the same time, I lived actually right across the street from Mariners Park, and there was a library right across the street. And I grew up loving learning. I had the wonderful opportunity. I would just get in the mood to read something, and I would trot on over to the library and browse and pick out a book and read it. So I read a lot of different things. I had wide-ranging interests. I wasn't particularly expert in anything. When I went away to college, I was a good student, not surprisingly. Okay, so yeah, PhD, yeah, right. You know that. But I was a good student, and I went away to college, and I had no idea what I wanted to major in. And actually, I was kind of unhappy. I went to UC San Diego because there wasn't enough emphasis on learning and understanding. And so I had to try to choose my majors, and finally I got some good advice from a counselor. He said, stop trying to figure out what you want to major in. Just start crossing off things that you know you don't want to major in. That actually got me unstuck. And so by the time it was beginning of my junior year and it was time to declare majors, I was either going to major in English or physics. I really didn't know much about what physicists did, but I knew that, and I was probably better at English, but I knew that if I majored in English, I probably wouldn't get a job. So I ended up majoring in, sorry all of you who should English. So I ended up majoring in physics. So most of my classmates went off to grad school. That's the normal path in physics. But I had no clue why I just liked math and I liked the way physicists thought. But I didn't know what it was like to work as a physicist. So I didn't go straight to grad school, and I got a job. I went to work at Maxwell Labs, and it was really a fortunate time because the economy was just pulling out of a recession. And the whole 2 years I was at Maxwell Labs, they were understaffed. And so even with a bachelor's degree, unusually I was given my own projects. And I loved the work. It turned out that physics fit me beautifully. I mean, there's a lot of things about physics that I like. I'm analytical. I like the analysis part of it. I love how we take sort of mathematical quantitative theory and connect that up with careful observation of the real world. And that really appealed to me. So I found that being a physicist was great. And plus, just the company I was in, we did some really cool things. Their specialty was plasma physics. In physics, plasmas are gases or charged particles. And so that was their specialty, was plasma physics. And actually, they had this big machine. And I was a junior scientist, so our offices were in the low-rent district right above this machine. And what would happen is they would go, charging. This is when the voltage is turned up and they start to charge up all the capacitors. Charging, ready to fire, firing. And then they'd fire the machine, and it was like, there's lightning basically inside the water, and then an enormous thunderclap. Our whole office would shake. I thought this was so cool. So there was only one thing wrong with this job for me, and it turned out I had been hired under false pretenses. It turned out that the purpose of our research was to develop a nuclear weapons simulator. Well, I wasn't really a pacifist, but I was close, and that wasn't for me. And so, although I loved the work and I loved plasma physics, I wanted to do something that I would be proud of, that I felt would actually really benefit society. So at that point, I decided to go to graduate school, and I got into the most prestigious program, which is at that time was at the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory, and I went away there. And so from that point on, I have concentrated on making fusion energy a reality someday. And of course, that's still in the distance, but it's gratifying to me. The intrinsic aspects of my work are still tremendously rewarding for all the reasons that I loved physics before. But at the same time, the world really needs clean, affordable energy sources. And so this was my first opportunity to take a value. Remember back, I was an ardent environmentalist, and combine it with my work so that we were trying to do something that could provide affordable and clean and abundant energy. And that still remains crucial today. If we do develop fusion energy as a reliable source, it could be the most important technological advance of the 21st century. It certainly would be a very major thing, because it will have a huge impact on the problems that we face with climate change. And the other thing is that people fight wars when energy is scarce, and it will have a huge impact on society through reducing the likelihood of war. So that was, remember, this is number one. So environmental value, swim fins. And yes, my wife and I do go to the ocean. We try to go at least once a week, year-round. Okay, so that comes to number two. It's a good thing I brought my props. Okay, so number two is this Bible verse. And it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." So as I told you, well, let me back up. So I grew up in a family where my father was a non-Christian and my mother was a Christian. And so as I was growing up, I thought a lot about the truth claims of Christianity and kind of thought very carefully about it, and finally decided, yes, I was a believer. And by the time I graduated from high school, I was a committed follower of Jesus. But in lots of ways, my faith was divorced from my work. I went through the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab. I got my PhD. We stayed a couple more years. I was really involved with my church, but that never had anything to do with what I did at work. And I got a job after that at the D3D Tokamak, which is down in San Diego, which is still the leading magnetic fusion facility in the country. And so I worked there, and I was really a closet Christian at work. When I was getting interviewed to become a faculty member at UCI, for me, it was sort of an opportunity to make a clean break. You know how if you have an identity, it's hard to change when people expect certain things of you? But coming here, it was an opportunity to make a clean break. And so I asked my wife, Mary, to write this Bible verse out for me, which I thought was appropriate anyway. It was about humility and understanding the nature of things. And I put it up on my bulletin board. Well, sure enough, within the first week, a senior experimental plasma physicist whose approval was crucial for me to get tenure walked in, squinted at that, and said, "You're not one of those crazy Jesus freaks, are you?" Okay, I'm really out of the closet. That was the thought bubble. But actually, for me, it's been nice. It's not appropriate here at the university to talk about your Christian faith. I teach classical mechanics now. I would never tell people about that in class. That's not what they're there for. And yet, there's this falsehood out there. A lot of people think that smart, educated people can't be Christians. And, I'm an outstanding scientist, and I'm smart, and I'm really a believer. And so I'm living disproof. I show that that's a lie through my life. Okay, so that was number 2. So that was sort of integrating kind of my basic Christian faith. Now, number 3 is the one that's going to be the most fun. Okay. It's the canon. So I got the job at UCI, and I started teaching. And it turned out I loved it. I just thought it was a blast. I was assigned introductory physics classes. We did lots of cool demonstrations. I had a ball doing it. My kids were young at that point, so I started to do assemblies at their school, Turtle Rock Elementary. And then my friend John Rosendahl, who was also associated with the physics department, and I started to do assemblies together. And it was John's idea that we not just go to Turtle Rock, because it was a lot of work to load up all the junk and go and do one assembly. Why don't we go to several schools? And so John arranged for us to go not just to Turtle Rock, but to go to Santa Ana as well. And in those days, I mean, it's amazing to me how young and energetic we were. We would do 10 assemblies in 2 days. It was just crazy, hauling around, the bed of nails and this giant bowling ball, and it was nuts. But anyway, we would do that. But it was extremely eye-opening to me, because we started out at Turtle Rock, where in Irvine, where our kids went, and then we went to these schools in Santa Ana, and no kidding, the primary kids, 1st through 3rd grade at Turtle Rock, would have as much retention and absorption of the show as upper grades at the other 3 schools that we would go to. And to me, that just pointed out that we have this ideal in America. It's like the Horatio Alger ideal, where if you work hard, you can succeed, and we want to have equality of opportunity. But the reality is that we don't have equality for opportunity. The field is not level. And it really motivated me in 2 ways. It made me realize about myself how I had a background like the kids in Turtle Rock. I came from a good home where I was well educated. I went to good schools in Newport, and I was really blessed. A biblical principle is that you're blessed to be a blessing. And I wanted to do that. there's another way I thought about it too, and that's that, you know, we have all these riches here at the University of California, but they weren't really being distributed in society very well. And I kind of thought, I mean, just in a little way, the whole idea about Jesus being incarnate is that he took his riches and emptied himself. So, you know, in a tiny way, I was taking the riches that I had and emptying myself. Oops, I didn't. I blame it on my wife. Before I got married, I never used to cry, and now I'm like emotionally incontinent, is what we say. Okay. So we did these shows. It was great, and a few years later, I started to train undergraduates, which had an added benefit that many of them became teachers. We had funding from the NSF for like 7 years. And actually, the contract monitors from the NSF, they were really interested in institutionalizing these kinds of programs. And so they would come on their site visits, and they would ask me why I did it and what they could do to institutionalize it. And I thought that was the most ludicrous question. It's like, we're a research university. Do you think this helps me in my research career? No! It takes time away from my research career. I do this because I feel like I'm blessed to be a blessing and because, you know, it's the right thing to do. And they didn't like that answer. But anyway, it's the truth. So, after the NSF funding ended, we had a couple years off, but then in 2012, my friend John died, which was awful, but a good thing came out of it. A foundation is now supporting our outreach program, and so it's restarted this last fall. And I want to show you my favorite demo from the shows that we did this fall. This is the liquid nitrogen cannon, and I don't think I want to shoot the camera. So turn it this way. Okay, so the show is about momentum. We use this demo in our lectures both to talk about Newton's third law, which is for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. We also use it for conservation of momentum. Liquid nitrogen boils at 77 degrees Kelvin, which is way colder than this, so it's basically boiling in there. That's the gunpowder, is the liquid nitrogen pressure. The water bottle is our cannonball, and you can see the cannon. So you can hear the gas coming out of the valve. I'll level it here. Whoops, I'll try to level it here. Close the valve, pressure builds up. Whoa! We got some letters back from our last show of the quarter. Dear Professor Heidbrink, Haley, and Archna, thank you for coming to my school. I was excited when I heard you were coming. I really liked all of the experiments. The top 3 I liked was the cannon, rocket, and the sailboat. Did you make the experiments? I really wish you can be here every day. I'm going to die if you don't come back. Please come back. Love, Jessica, 4th grade. Okay, that was part 3, chance to integrate God's concern for social justice. God loves the poor, part of my faith, to integrate that into my work here at the university. Part 4, here's my visual aid for this one. This is a clock, and this is in Russian, and this is from Ecclesiastes, Bible verse from Ecclesiastes. So right from the time we came to UCI, I started teaching Sunday school at Mariners Church. And I did it for a long time, and I got quite good at it. I learned how to make it engaging, biblically accurate, and effective. And so now, I actually believe that God's personal and that he can communicate with us. But in my personal experience, that's been a rarity. About 8 years ago, I actually felt that God had communicated specifically with me, and he wanted me to develop curriculum for Mariners Church, for the Sunday school. So I organized a team. We did a whole bunch of work. We got together a bunch of lessons. We did pilots of them. And all that was going along. And then the church decided not to use any of it. And I'm like, oh, okay, did I hear wrong? Is God really even there? I mean, it was a spiritual crisis for me. But it happened that we had signed up already. We already had our tickets and everything. That happened the week before we were going to go to Belarus. My wife and my son and another couple were going to Belarus to help with a camp, for a church camp, for 2 weeks long. And we had no idea where we were going into. Belarus is this is a whole other story, but Belarus is still a communist country, and they still have a statue of Lenin and all that. So we got there. It turned out that they were actually expecting us to lead the program the second week. And all of a sudden, the five of the lessons that we had developed were, we frantically, after each evening, we would be translating them and adapting them into Russian and using them the next day. Turned out that this material, they loved it. We were going through an international organization. And so the materials kind of fast forward a little bit. The materials got translated into Russian, distributed throughout Belarus and Ukraine, got translated into Arabic, distributed throughout Egypt, and were used very, very widely and had this profound impact that I never anticipated. Okay, connection. I'm glad you like that. Okay, so how's that connect to work? Well, it turned out after we did all this work to get these things and get them translated and stuff, that nobody was going to use it unless we came to train them to use it. Mary and I didn't know that was part of the deal initially, but like after we spent countless hours doing this, yeah, we would come. So we came to do the training, and we did it first. But what's happened for me in work has been just been fantastic the last few years. I travel a lot internationally for my fusion energy research, and so 1 year, spring break, they were going to use the stuff in the summer in Egypt. So 1 year, I gave my final rush to LAX. We flew to Cairo. The next morning, we were doing a seminar in Cairo. And then the next day, we went to Armenia. And the next day, we went to Alexandria. And the day after that, we flew to Amsterdam, where I had a week-long conference in Leiden. And another time, there was a week-long conference in Kiev. Remember, Ukraine was one of the countries that it was. I did seminars the weekend before and the weekend after. Just last September, I was in China. We had a conference in Beijing. We did these seminars about how to teach children about the Bible at a big church in Beijing last September. So, and this was a souvenir. I forgot to say it. This was a souvenir from the first trip to Belarus. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I have to say that I have a wonderful job. It's one that has allowed me to integrate my most cherished values into my work. I get to do research on fusion energy, and remember, this could be so important for the environment, and that's something that is important to me. I get opportunities like this to talk about my faith. It's not something I broadcast or go out my way to do, but I get to be living proof that an intelligent person can be a believer. I get to do this outreach program, which obviously is really fun and makes a tiny contribution to social justice. And lastly, I get to travel to all kinds of really interesting places. It's been fascinating for me. There's such a big difference between being a tourist and actually like putting on a workshop in a different place. You have to understand the culture and you get educated. And so this has been a wonderful opportunity for me to do that. That's it.
Thank you, Dan. Now we're going to open up for some question and answer period. And we should have someone with a microphone that will go to, if anybody wants to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone over to you.
So, what got you into fusion, nuclear fusion? Because it's a very interesting topic, and like, yeah, it's really interesting. What got you into that?
Well, so the scientific basis for fusion energy is this plasma physics. So in order to get fusion reactions, what you need to do is you need to have ions get really close to each other and fuse. That's where the fusion part comes, and then that will produce net energy. When you get things hot enough that, you've learned in elementary school that two positive charges repel each other, so they don't want to get close to each other. So in order to overcome that repulsion, they have to have a lot of energy in order to get close enough to have the fusion part, the nuclear bond, take over so that they can fuse. And so because the ions have to be so hot, they've already lost all their electrons, and you end up with this gas of charged particles. That's what a plasma is, a gas of charged particles. So you have ions and you have electrons, and so to get fusion to work, we have to understand the plasma physics. And then within plasma physics, the whole thing is super hot. The whole thing is like 10 million degrees Celsius, but I study actually the parts that are hot compared to that. My specialty is what we call energetic particles. Now everything's energetic, but I study things that are like 100 times more energy than that. That's my particular specialty within fusion energy.
Good question. Another question.
Actually, it's 100 million degrees. 10 to the 4 times 10 to the 4. Yeah.
Over the second row.
I have a question back here also. So you said that you did seminars all around over the world and that they got translated into Russian and Arabic. When you go to teach those, do you teach them in English or do you speak a lot of different languages?
I do not speak a lot of different languages. I'll tell you that this just reminds me of something that's funny. So, the political climate is different in a lot of countries, and including China. So we just went to China, and we were told that if we did the seminar there, we would be teaching English. And Mary and I thought, great, we finally get to teach in English. It won't be translated. Well, it turned out that was just a euphemism to sort of provide cover. And it was the same seminar as ever, and we got translated into Chinese, just like we had been translated into Arabic or Russian or Ukrainian and the other places. There is one thing. A lot of it, you don't have to know the language, because you can sort of gather from my presentation here that I actually believe people learn better if there's visual aids. And so some of it doesn't need translation.
Is that actual nitrogen in those tires versus compressed air? And what would happen if you had
No, the tires are just ordinary air. It's just liquid nitrogen is in the dewar here. This is like a big thermos. So
I asked because of the green caps.
no, I don't know why they have green caps.
When you buy tires and they have green caps, it's because there's nitrogen inside versus compressed air.
Yeah, but this isn't. Sorry.
When you were an undergrad and you were crossing off things of not to major in, what was one of the first things you crossed off?
Are you trying to get me to give offense? Honestly, I don't really remember what are the first things I crossed off. I tell you, one of the things that did appeal to me about physics, though, I mean, the social sciences didn't last as long for me. I don't feel this way anymore, but at that time of my life, I thought, well, that's just like people and societies, and that can change. And it really appealed to me that in physics, it was the natural laws, and that those were immutable in a way. So that was important to me at the time. At my age, I don't actually feel that way anymore. I think societies are really interesting and worthy of study as well.
I apologize for how selfish this question is. I'm an undergraduate in Dr. Ivan's classical mechanics class. But how do you think comparing going straight to grad school versus joining the workforce for a few years and then pursuing maybe your PhD after that, how would you compare those situations coming from, I think it's generally thought of, if you get your physics bachelor's and you go straight to grad school, do you think there was a lot to learn from joining the workforce right away and then maybe coming back?
Yes. There are advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is the biggest hurdle in graduate school is that you've got to pass this comprehensive exam, which is the qualifying exam. And so you have to have like all this stuff that you've learned as an undergraduate and what you've learned in your graduate courses. I had a 2-year break. Even with a 2-year break, when I first got back to graduate school, I mean, graduate school is kind of a step up anyway, but when I first got back, I was blown away. And so it was hard for me. The advantage, though, was that unlike my classmates, as the race went on in the coursework, they were tired. They felt like, I've been going to school for, I don't know, what is that, 15, 16 years in a row, and I'm sick of this. I felt completely different. I'd been out in the workforce and had found, as an undergraduate, I'm always wondering, why are they teaching me this stuff? Am I ever going to use this? I had my job where all of a sudden I wished I knew all of that stuff that I didn't learn as an undergraduate. And so my motivation was way higher than my classmates. At the same time that my ability to dip into the math toolbox and pull something out was actually below my classmates. And, so there you go. Also, I was fortunate to get a really good job where I got to work as a physicist. Not all things that a bachelor's degree are like that.
Do you ever feel like your scientific knowledge bumps up against your religious beliefs?
Well, yeah, I would say yes. Let me use this as a springboard for a question I expected to get asked. So, I have like a 3-hour lecture on this, so this is going to be the executive summary. So, one of the biggest issues is how does creation jive with what the Bible says? And so first of all, the world really is old and changing. There's the Big Bang in astronomy. There's plate tectonics in geology. There's evolution in biology. And those theories are all enormously successful theories that meet all the standards for a correct scientific theory. And that's the world that we live in. So the real crux of the issue, which I personally have dealt with a lot through my life, is how do we interpret the Bible? And that's where the fights come from, which I view as enormously harmful. But I think that there's kind of, to caricature, two extremes. One extreme, and these were both quite popular early in the 20th century. One extreme is the liberal point of view. When you do that, you read through the Bible. If there's parts you don't like, you throw it away, and you change what you don't like. And I mean, Thomas Jefferson, even though he's not early 20th century, epitomizes that with the Jefferson Bible, where he just cut out the parts. The problem with that for somebody who's a believer is that if you do that, the Bible loses its ability to change you. You just impose your views on it. And so there's a verse in Timothy which is about how the Bible is supposed to correct our thinking and rebuke us and equip us. And the Bible doesn't change us at all if we take that extreme. The other extreme, which was largely a reaction to liberalism with the other extreme of the pendulum, was fundamentalism, where everything is to be taken literally and it's just what it says. Now, there's an arrogance in, I only take the parts that I like, but there's also an arrogance to this, which is a little more subtle. The arrogance is to think that the way I understand things from my cultural background is the correct way to understand things. And once you say that, you realize that's nonsense. The Bible is an ancient manuscript. It was not written for 21st century people with a scientific culture. And it actually makes no sense. In fact, if you think about Genesis, I mean, what if they'd written Genesis the way we would like it now? Would anybody from previous centuries have known what it meant? Would they even understand it? That's absurd. So the key thing is to avoid the arrogance of everything's my own perspective, and the arrogance of I only care about what I only take what I want, and to approach the Bible with humility, recognizing that the right way to look at things is to understand the manuscripts for what they were originally intended, the points they were originally intended. By the way, Genesis was not intended to give us a scientific description of how the world was made. The people could care less about that to whom it was written. And actually, the purpose of Genesis, when you step back and say, well, what was it about, was a rousing refutation of the pagan worldview, where the world is fickle and there's gods and bad stuff just happens, and you never go to bad stuff and you never know whether it's going to happen. The view of Genesis is that we live in this orderly world that has is good and it's intelligible. In fact, it's not in my opinion, it's not a historical accident that our modern scientific worldview was developed by people who accepted that basic worldview, which is the main point of Genesis. So that was more than you asked for, but that I prepared that little speech. So.
Considering your religious beliefs and your scientific knowledge and what gets you high in life, if you could kind of summarize briefly what you find fundamentally important in your life as a person and a human being, if you could just give a brief little summary. Is that even?
I don't know if I can give a brief little summary. I mean, it's sort of, I could sort of recap. I mean, I love body surfing. You know, when Mary and I go to the beach, we're like, and this is a blast. I don't know. I love writing papers too. I told you I was almost going to major in English, and it was so fun for me that most scientists don't like to write. I love to write. For me, like there's this birthing process when the first draft of the paper that I wake up super early in the morning and kind of rush in and to do it. So I get it. That's a thrill for me. I'm not answering your question. Sorry. I don't know.
Anybody else? Yes, good. Down in front.
So you started off with a little bit of a scary story about your first introduction to UCI with the senior professor coming in and shocking you with his idea of your posting on your bulletin board. But we also know that it happened that you got tenure here.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about the negotiation between that point and getting tenure?
Actually, it was just more that I was afraid than that. I mean, well, okay, I was clever, actually, in a way. We had two senior scientists in plasma physics, and they didn't really get along that well. So I did one project in one of the guys' labs and another project in another one of their labs. And then I had my own stuff, like to prove independence. And they were all successful. And so no worries. You know, I got tenure. I'm still here.
It seems just from your whole story, you're just able to do. And I feel like with myself and talking to other people I know, there's an ambivalence with, you know, moving from I know there's a problem to doing something about it. How do you deal with that ambivalence? Do you have any ambivalence with just doing?
I think it's largely innate. I mean, I don't know if it's true, but my kids say they don't know anybody with my kind of work ethic. I think it's bizarre. I mean, I grew up in Newport where the cultural standard, you know, when we got good marks, we hit our grades, so people would make fun of us. And you were supposed to be a cool surfer dude. I don't know what went wrong with me, but I love this, but I just missed the cool surfer dude part somehow. And so there's that. And also, by personality, I'm a task-oriented person. So, you know, I like to have a project and do it and check it off. My mind works like that. So I think that makes it easier. It's partly a personality thing to be kind of born as a person who's energetic and also is like that. It makes, of course, there's accompanying challenges. There's things like treating people decently and not just running them over because I got a project to do. That's a big challenge for me. So, but I think for me, this is just part of my personality, and it fits. And one of the nice things about the university, you know, when I first came, they told me, oh, the great thing about the university is you have this independence, and so you can do whatever you want. And in lots of ways, it's a lie, because within your research area, you got to get funding, and in order to get funding, you have to already have an established track record in that. So you can't like change and just go get funding in something else. But there on the margins here, there's this tremendous amount of freedom to do things like have your outreach program. So I think that helps some too.
I was just wondering if you had people who have inspired you in your life, either in your work or in other areas of your life, who's been an inspiration to you.
Actually, sure. I mean, oh. Don't think I'll talk about that one. My thesis advisor, I had a really good thesis advisor. And that helped me tremendously professionally. I don't know, I just learned so much from my thesis advisor. And then I've had lots of people who've inspired me in other ways, but I feel like I'll just start crying, so, because they're dead. Sorry.
Okay, here, we'll get you a microphone.
One last, okay.
Sorry, maybe it is too tough a question, but you're a person of tremendous faith, and yet obviously you grapple with grief and loss in terms of death. So maybe how do you reconcile those two things? That's a really deep question.
Yeah, sorry. Well, okay. You know, mortality sucks. Jack was here before. We played soccer together for a long time. I kind of try to pretend that I'm not almost 60 and keep playing soccer. And, as my mother-in-law says, growing old is not for sissies. But I mean, the fundamental fundamental doctrine of Christianity is that Jesus was incarnate. He died and rose again.
Sorry.
It's tough being emotionally incontinent.
Okay, well, that was excellent. Thank you very much.